All right. So I screwed that up. I'm supposed to put that little coming soon or starting soon on a loop, but I didn't. And here I am, and I'm ready to go anyways. So that's all fine and dandy. Oh, how come I can hear myself? Somebody's got some.
YouTube in the background.
All right, all right. Anyways, here we are in Skeptic Spin for Skeptic Spin's very first debate. Starting off a little bit rough. That's totally my fault. But those of you guys are here to check this out. Thank you so much for coming. I'm your moderator slash host tonight, Justin Yahooligan to some of you guys. And tonight we are debating the topic of, is the Christian God real? Brand new face and someone I've only recently met and so far am enjoying greatly is Octavio from the Solutions Podcast. Octavio, how are you tonight?
I am great and happy to be here, Skeptic Spin. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here. And thanks for Mark Reid for accepting this debate.
Yeah, so and with that, the other face you see here is from Mark Reid Atheism, Mark Reid debating the atheistic side. How are you, Mark?
I'm tired, but really happy to be here. And I really want to thank Octavio for showing up and providing the negative, the affirmative position. I told you I was tired. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Octavio is going to be arguing my position today. No, I thank you so much. And thanks to Skeptic Spin and Justin for moderating. And thanks to the audience for showing up. And it should be a great debate. Really looking forward to it.
I'm very excited for this. So, everyone who's already here on time and watching and ready to go, thank you so much for showing up. I want all of you to understand the amount of flexibility these gentlemen have shown in order to make this happen. Octavio from the UK is knocking on almost midnight over there, right? It's like 11 p.m. for you right now.
11 p.m. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 11:05. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Mark Reid, as anyone who would know, is coming from Australia. So the sun's not even over there yet, is it, Mark? Or is it starting to come up now? Yeah, so it's his 6 a.m. I'm the only one here who's like, it's classic, just traditional Sunday evening, and I'm not even expected to perform. So I thank both of you so much for the flexibility in putting this on.
One thing I have noticed, it's a Commonwealth stream though.
Yeah, it is. That's right. We all hail to the Queen at some point. Or King, I guess now. Yeah. All right. Well, let's not sit here and waste any more time. Myself and everyone who is here to watch is excited. If you have a question for our debaters, what I would like you guys to do is at Skeptic Spin in the chat, and I will pin it for at the end of the debate, and we will go through those questions. In the meantime, the topic is the Christian God real? Octavio from the Solution Podcast is on the pro side. He will go first. We will give 8-minute openings. Let me get my trusty timer out. Right. Okay. And we're doing 8-minute openers. And Octavio, the floor is yours. Good luck.
Thank you. Well, what a question. Is the Christian God real? Well, the simple answer is yes, he is. The second person of the Trinity, 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ, entered creation by becoming incarnate and living amongst men. And according to the historical records to which we have mountains of, Jesus was a real person. He was born in Bethlehem, had 12 disciples, he claimed to be God, was crucified because of it by Pontius Pilate, and his disciples claimed that he resurrected from the dead 3 days later. What emerged after his death was a community of early disciples and followers who went around proclaiming that he had resurrected and he is God, even though they knew that they could be put to death by the Jewish and Roman authorities. Nevertheless, with nothing to gain, the historical evidence shows that Christians continue to preach that he had resurrected, that he is God, and as a result, their persecution lasted for 300 years under the Roman Empire. In spite of this persecution, the historical record shows that Christianity continued to grow, and as a result, we have a rich historical tradition that confirms and goes back to everything the disciples claimed 2,000 years ago. These are the historical facts, and I, amongst countless followers throughout history, including 2.5 billion Christians in the world today, believe in it. The historical evidence shows that Jesus Christ existed, guys. He claimed to be God, he died on the cross and resurrected from the dead. Oh, by the way, he will return again to judge the living and the dead, and those that choose to reject him will be sent to the burning lake of fire and suffer there for eternity. My opponent can either choose to deny this fact or accept it, but what he can't deny is that the historical records, especially the Gospels, which were written between 60 AD and 90 AD, proves Christ to be a real person and, according to his disciples, divine. By the way, we also have non-Christian historical records that prove Jesus' existence and claims, such as Flavius Josephus, Tacitus. I'm sure you guys heard of these guys, and others, including the Talmud and even the Quran. Not to mention the fact that the majority of scholars and historians today agree when it comes to Jesus' existence and what his followers claimed about him. Well, they don't necessarily agree with the how do I say this? They don't necessarily agree with the supernatural aspects of the Bible, but nevertheless, that was Jesus a real person? Yes, historically speaking, he was. For my opponent to prove me wrong, he will have to somehow prove that the historical evidence does not exist and that it does not claim that Christ existed and resurrected from the dead. I personally reckon that it will be an impossible task for my opponent, since there is nothing in ancient history that comes close to the amount of evidence that we have for Jesus Christ. We have over 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 Latin manuscripts, and 9,300 manuscripts in other languages. And of many of the textual variants that we have, 97% of these textual variants are insignificant. We have over 80 church fathers spanning from the 1st century to the 4th century, not to mention non-Christian sources. Can a supernatural event like the resurrection be considered historical? Or any of the miracles that Jesus did during his 3-year ministry? The answer is yes. Why? Because history is about recording what happened and not what we think can or can't happen. Are we obligated to believe it? No, we are not. I don't believe. I don't believe. I don't believe I share a common ancestor with an ape, or that a single-celled organism which appeared out of nowhere somehow evolved into 9.8 million organisms over God knows how many millions of years. But they tell me this happened and it's apparently science. Do I believe in it? No. I just ignore it as stupid and nonsensical. The point that I'm making here is that these events were recorded as having happened historically, and that's all that matters. In a time where a person could be stoned to death for blasphemy, I don't see why anyone would see the advantage in lying. To summarize, the historical evidence shows that Christ is God, that the Christian God is real. That's my opening, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. Very well said. Well spoken. Good job.
Thank you.
Mark, it's your turn. 8 minutes for your opener. Do you need to screen share?
I do. Yeah, I've already shared it. Actually, I'm way ahead of you. So,
all right.
We're just going to ready to rock.
Just let me.
Just tell me how to.
Where did my overlay? We'll turn that off. All right, Mark. 8 minutes is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I've got 8 minutes, a bit quick, but I'll rush through it. First off, I want to just define what a god is. That's my definition of a god. Basically, it covers all proposed gods, not just the Christian one, but we better home in on what the Christian one actually is. So basically, it's not my intention to strawman my opponent, so I expect to clarify any of these properties that do not or more that apply, but generally this is considered by Christians to be the attributes God would have. This is the classical definition, which has dominated Christian theology since the time of the Church Fathers. It's largely remained unchanged until today. However, clarification must be given by my opponent on the God that's being proposed and any attributes it may or may not have. Now, what does it mean to exist? I just want to go into this briefly. It means that it's not just the concept that exists, and it has to be the actuality of the case. So I'll compare it to a video game. If a character in that video game exists, it only exists conceptually. It does not have any causal relationship with anything else in reality. I realize this may be pedantic, but it's important to note that if a God only exists conceptually, then it's only a figment of their believers' imaginations and nothing more. A God must actually exist in reality to be said to exist at all. So normally I argue inductive arguments or evidential arguments against the existence of God. However, today I'm doing something a bit different. I'm presenting 3 logical arguments against the existence of God. These show why a God simply cannot exist as the Christians claim they would. These are not exhaustive, and there's many other problems with the God figure, but I'll just focus on these 3. As a God is supposed to be a trinity and tri-omni-God, using 3 does feel appropriate. Firstly, the problem of evil. This is a huge one that has no satisfactory answer by Christians. According to the doctrine, God has a plan for all humanity, and that ostensibly includes the infliction of great evils upon us, or presumably the allowance for evils to be inflicted on us by a third party. However, this is a problem as it causes one of the properties ascribed to a God to break. If a God is all good, they would not inflict this. If God is all powerful, they would not fail to stop it. And if a God is all-knowing, they would not be ignorant to our suffering. The only out on this problem is to say that the suffering being inflicted will be good in the end, but that does lead to a bigger problem. Take our example of disease that kills children. If that suffering is done because a God knows that it will lead to a good outcome, then the child getting these diseases or even dying from them is a good thing. So where does that leave medicine as we fight to cure the disease in the child? All of us will say that it is a good thing that we cure the disease, but it provides a problem as we are thwarting the good that a God is trying to do. If a God wanted us to cure the child with medicine, then why did children die of disease for thousands of years until we invented the cure? And why do some cures fail and some succeed? The opposing viewpoint would say that these diseases are not good nor evil, and that they are just part of an uncaring nature, which is logically consistent and does not run into this problem. The second problem is the Trinity concept. It's completely illogical and irrational. God is described as being one being. However, that one being is 3 persons. Each of those 3 persons is a complete representation of God, with nothing external needed for completion. However, this makes absolutely no sense. If each of the 3 persons is 100% God, then you have 300% God. I did the math on this and it checks out. There should be 3 gods, but the Christians say, no, there's only one God, even though the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is, you guessed it, God, total and complete. This is completely illogical and makes no sense whatsoever. There's also a massive problem with a being all-powerful and not having authority over part of existence. Each entity that is a God should have authority over the other. But if the Father doesn't have authority over the Son or the Holy Spirit, then it's not all-powerful. And if it does have authority over the Son and the Holy Spirit, then the Father is not all-powerful. The Son and the Holy Spirit are not all-powerful. So it gets into a logical conundrum where it isn't possible to have an all-powerful being in this situation. Now we come to divine hiddenness, and this concerns knowledge, which is justified true belief. This is one where the power of God tries to hide the evidence that we should see in order that his followers employ faith. Essentially, this is an apologetics to why we never have any evidence of God. The problem with this is that God is all-powerful, could make it so no one would ever know that a God exists. This means that by design, a Christian cannot demonstrate that God exists, and a world that appears to be godless is the one that we observe. The problem with this is there is literally no difference between a world with an all-powerful divine cloaking device and a world that just lacks a God. This means that a Christian cannot know that a God exists because they cannot access a justification for that God by design. Now it gets even worse when you consider that God wishes us to know that he exists. An omniscient God would know that implementing divine hiddenness would cause people not to believe. So there is no way a God could not know this is what will happen due to a lack of evidence. So either a God does not want some people to know that he exists, or they lack the power to provide convincing evidence, which is equally unacceptable in Christian doctrines. The logical conclusion is that God simply does not exist, which is why we have insufficient evidence to believe in a God. In summation, we have the problem of evil cannot exist as the triomni nature conflicts with what is evident. The problem of the Trinity, that God cannot exist as the three in one, because that is completely illogical. And the problem of divine hiddenness, that a God cannot exist as its very wishes would guarantee overwhelming, irrefutable evidence. Thank you. I hope I came under the 8 minutes there.
Yeah, we could have stuck with the original 6-minute plan from both of you at this point.
Oh, well,
But that's fine. That's all good.
So sorry, guys.
Yeah, no.
Just want to make you guys aware of something. For some reason, it's I don't know if it's my internet connection or it's not coming across. The connection seems to be a little bit off. I'm not sure if you guys are experiencing the same thing, but I'm definitely experiencing it. Could be me. I don't know. But yeah,
considering the 3 different corners of the planet we're trying to reach through this stream, there's definitely going to be some possible delays. Are you experiencing delays through the Streamyard at the moment, or is it your YouTube that's experiencing the delays?
Good question. Good question. May have some tabs open that I need to shut down, but I was definitely experiencing delays. That's the reason why I had to let you guys know. But yeah, let's continue. Let's continue to see how it goes.
Our absolute worst case scenario, Octavio, and for anyone watching live on Octavio's channel right now, will be that I still will have this debate. So like the worst case scenario, Octavio, is you could do a repost and then do your own little comment or review of it at the same time then or something.
Okay. Great.
Okay? Like, and I would be happy to download and share you with the raw files.
Yeah.
So don't sweat it.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.
With that, before we move on, I want to thank everyone who's here to watch live between Octavio's channels and Mark Reid's channel and Skeptic Spin. If you have a question for our debaters later, make sure you @ Skeptic Spin in the chat. I'll do my best to mark them aside so that I can ask our debaters those questions later. In the meantime, you guys have a lot of work to do because in the description, you will find both links to the Solution podcast where Octavio lives and Mark Reid Atheism. You need to go around there, smash that like button, and make sure you check out their content for later review. And if you've got time, I would really love if you guys would like and subscribe over on Skeptic Spin as well. With that, I very quickly would like to hop in here with a question. Octavio, I'm going to come at you first. Mark, I'll give you a chance after Octavio answers briefly to either extend or comment on my question, and I'll give Octavio the final word on it. And then, Mark, I will ask you a similar question. Octavio, I'm curious of what is your definition of faith?
My definition of faith. My definition of faith is that which we can confidently believe in, something that we have some sort of evidence, some sort of indication that is true. I don't believe in believing in things without having reason to believe. So that would be my definition of faith, something that I can look at and I can see that there's truth behind it. There is something reasonable behind it. That would be my definition of faith.
All right, Mark, do you have anything you would like to add to that question regarding faith, Octavio?
Well, that seems to conflict with the definition of faith as given in the Bible, which is the substance of things hoped for. The faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen.
So what
all right, so this not looking for a discussion from you. However, Mark's made a statement, so this will be final word, Octavio. Don't return with a question.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
So go ahead, Octavio. This is your final word on the topic, and then I'm going to ask Mark a question.
Oh, my final word on the topic. I don't. I mean, I would have to look at the verse, but I don't think the disciples would have followed Jesus if Jesus didn't give them things to believe in. For example, Jesus Christ is recorded saying that if you don't believe what I claim, at least believe from the works that I do. So they had reason to believe Jesus, for Jesus' works, for Jesus' miracles, for if they had reason to believe that they had reason to trust in him and believe in him. So, and that's the reason why the disciples ended up following him in the first place, because he gave them reason to believe, and that's the reason why they had faith in him.
All right, thank you so much. Mark Reid, can you
Mhm.
share with us your definition of atheism?
My definition of atheism is the lack of belief in any god or gods. That's the contemporary normative definition, the one that people most use. There's other definitions in philosophy that are used, but that's the one I generally use. However, I'm not hard on that, and it's well understood in philosophy that atheist and atheism is a polysemous word. It's got multiple definitions depending on the context in which it's being used.
All right, any comments, questions, Octavio?
Yeah. Would you agree that the definition of atheism has changed over the last few decades? I mean, it went from positively asserting that they don't believe in God to now it's we lack belief in a God. Would you say that's true?
I think perhaps a little bit. Yeah, probably.
All right, perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Once again, guys, don't forget, like and subscribe. Add comments down below all around the world between the UK, Australia, and North America. Notice how I didn't specify
Sorry,
Canada.
can I just follow that up because I wasn't actually finished there,
Oh,
Justin?
I
Yeah,
apologize. I thought you were.
no, that's
You may,
okay.
absolutely.
Because atheist used to mean anybody that wasn't part of the Christian religion. It used to be somebody of any other religion, but it's actually changed multiple times. So it used to be something altogether different, as in non-Christian, essentially.
All right.
That's it. Sorry,
All right. Good. Anyways, yeah, if you guys are watching out there and you think you've got what it takes to debate, I myself would love to moderate some more debates here on Skeptic Spin. I have many friends who are prepared to debate, and we're always looking for more people. So again, Octavio, the pleasure of having you here is awesome. Thank you so much. So feel free to, in the comments at Skeptic Spin, let me know, what point of views you would love to debate or topics you would like to debate. And I promise, if we can find a spot for you or an opponent, I will do that legwork. Okay. With that, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the debate. We're going to do some back and forth, 2 minutes, on the topic of is the Christian God real for the next 40 minutes. So, Octavio, with that, the first 2 minutes is yours.
Yes. Is the Christian God real? I think I've answered that question because I pointed to the fact, to the historical fact that Jesus Christ is a real historical figure. He claimed to be God. We worship him as God. He claimed to be God. He was crucified for that, for blaspheming, and his followers claimed that he resurrected, which basically confirmed his claims that he was God. Now, had he not resurrected, had he not resurrected, we would have just looked at him as a great teacher, someone who said some really nice things. But in terms of is the Christian God real? I mean, honestly, I don't think that's even a question that we should be asking because we have the historical evidence to prove that he is real. Um, uh, and this is not, we are not talking about mythology here. We are talking about a real person that really lived 2,000 years ago. That really had 12 disciples. And people claim that he made miracles. Not just the disciples alone, his followers alone. Later on, 400 years with the Talmud, 600 years with the Quran. Um, you know, I mean, I really don't understand the question, is the Christian God real? Because the Christian God would be Jesus Christ. He would be the definition of the Christian God. So, and everything that he said was, came true. He confirmed the scriptures before, and yeah. So to me, I think the question goes back to history, and you just have to look at history and claims that were made
All right, that's
about
time.
Jesus. Okay, good.
Mark, 2 minutes.
Yeah, so historically, we don't attribute necessarily supernatural causes just because they're claimed to have happened in a book. The fact is that we have no contemporary records for Jesus. The earliest one was 30 years after the presumed death of Jesus. Now, I'm not a mythicist. I'm happy to say, hey, there was probably a person or possibly multiple people called Jesus or Yeshua, as it was known in Palestine about that time. There is mentions of them, but a lot of the sources that you've quoted are extremely problematic. People like Flavius Josephus. Josephus was a devout Jew, and we know that his records were tampered with by the early church fathers. We know this because he refers to Jesus as Christus in one passage in the Testimonium, which means that he, being a devout Jew, he would never actually use that word. And it also breaks up the flow of the passage so he doesn't sound like how Josephus usually writes. Now, Tacitus never actually said that Jesus was real. What he said was that there was a bunch of people called Christians who believed a certain thing. So that's not a historical recording that the events in that area in Judea at about 0 AD actually, in fact, happened. There's all kinds of problems with the narrative around the resurrection story, from the amount of women that were there when he actually died. One account says that he died before the Passover feast. One account says that he died after the Passover feast. Both can't be true. There's problems with what happened after he died, whether the disciples stayed in Jerusalem as commanded or whether they went to Galilee. There's problems with that. There's problems with all kinds of things in there. And we don't have the originals. Now, you're sort of saying that they were written by, the Gospels were written
That's
by
your 2
these
minutes, Mark.
people. Thank you.
Okay. Just to read what Flavius Josephus wrote, and I'm quoting him here. Now, there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ, and when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive. Now, I mean, the antiquities of the Jews, guys. You can go and look that up for yourselves. Tacitus basically describes what how evil Nero was, the Emperor Nero, and he talks about Christians being killed and so on. He does mention Christians and so on, but you have to, and I've got a quote here from him, and I can quote that for you guys. But the thing is, I mean, Romans spoke Latin and Greek and so on, so it's I mean, the fact is that all the Gospels confirm that the resurrection took place. That's it. There is no denying that. All the Gospels confirm that the resurrection took place, and we have a rich 2,000 years of tradition to basically prove that that's the case. So no one has gone against everything that Mark Reid is claiming. No one has said this has not happened. I mean, the Talmud themselves confirmed that Jesus was someone who apparently was a sorcerer, according to them. Someone who performed magic tricks and so on and so forth. The Quran confirms that he was a miracle worker. And these are books that came 400, 600 years later. So this idea that the Gospels don't, there's issues here within the resurrection and the women that.
That's your 2
To me,
minutes.
that's just
Octavio.
subjective.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Now, James Dunn has said there's broad consensus among scholars that this was interpolation, which is the writing of early church fathers into historical records to try to make Jesus more than he was. The passage which we have now found to read was, there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, who is the doer of startling deeds, a teacher of such men as to receive the truth with pleasure. And he gained a following among many Jews and many of Greek origin. And when Pilate at the suggestion of the principal men among us, condemned him to the cross. Those that loved him at first did not forsake him, and the tribe of Christians, so named for him, are not extinct to this day. That is actually what he wrote, not the interpolation, which was added later, which there's a big problem here because Josephus was a Jew. He did not believe that Jesus was the Christ or Christos, as that passage says, because he was a Jew. He didn't actually believe that. If he did, he would be a Christian, and he clearly states he's not one of them. So we know that that is a forgery by the early church, and that is consensus among scholars. So I won't go into that. That is the scholarly consensus. Now, the Gospels, who wrote them? Why did they write them? We don't have the originals. What else was added? We don't know. So there is no way to determine that those are actually correct. There's a passage in Mark, the long ending of Mark, if you're aware of it, that was added later. We know it was added later because we found manuscripts without that passage in it, the short ending of Mark, which if you look at a Bible these days, it will basically say, this is the long ending. We do not believe this was originally in the manuscripts because there are earlier manuscripts without it. As Bart Ehrman points out, what else was added to it? We don't know because we don't have the originals, and that's a massive problem. It may be that some things were added later, like the saints rising out of their graves and the earthquake, because it wasn't only Jesus that, according to the Gospels, came back to life on that day. Apparently, a great many saints rose from their graves and met people in all around
That's your
Jerusalem.
time, Mark.
Thank you.
Interpolations, basically, I would rather believe what the people actually say, and I would rather people make up their own minds rather than claim things that that are not necessarily factual. So, for example, you said that we don't have the originals. Well, so what does that mean? Does that mean that what was passed on is not true? What exactly are we saying? Are we saying that what was copied was not true? Is that what we're saying? Because at the end of the day, the Christian community would have been very much aware if anything was being corrupted, or if anything was not being copied properly, and so on and so forth. So when you say things, we don't have the original, that's a major problem. What do you mean by that? How is it a major problem? We've got 5,800 manuscripts. We can compare them all. What I'm seeing is assumptions are being made here about whether or not things were copied properly or not. And this is not something that someone in the 21st century can make, to be honest with you. I would rather trust the people at that time, during that time, the apostles themselves, because obviously the religion grew and it became what it became today. So if anything was being falsified, if anything was being, corrupted, I'm sure people would have checked it back then. So don't understand your point there.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, is Mike in? Oh, yeah. Okay. So what I'm referring to is Mark 9 to 20, which was an addition later, and we know it was an addition later because there are texts without that addition. It was added later to the fact. So the whole point is that because we don't have the originals, we don't know what else may have been added. There might be some of your favorite passages in the Bible that were added later. Perhaps the saints rising from their graves was not actually written by the author. And I note that you have not addressed the authorship of these documents, who we know wrote them, because they're anonymous as far as we know. We don't know who wrote them. The early church fathers ascribed them to these apostles, but there is no evidence that they are the people that actually wrote them. The fact that the religion grew is irrelevant to whether the facts around that time were true or not. Islam grew very fast as well, but we don't say, well, that must be true because it grew. If Islam outgrows Christianity, as statistics are telling me it's slowly doing, that doesn't make it any more true than Christianity. So it's an ad populum argument. It's irrelevant. And a lot of the sort of things that you said, like why would they there was no advantage to doing this, it sort of suggests there's no advantage to propagating your religion in order to make it flourish. Now, they may have believed it's the truth. That doesn't negate that it's either real or it's not. It doesn't matter if they believed in it or not. Suicide bombers believe that their religion is correct and kill themselves. It doesn't mean that their religion is true.
All right. Your answer, Octavio?
I just want everyone to understand that this is purely Mark's opinion. Whether or not people corrupted anything, even the addition, the fact that you even know that there was an addition, is because we have enough scriptures. We've got enough manuscripts for you to compare it against. So if they were trying to hide anything, if there was some kind of conspiracy to hide anything, why have that blatant addition there? If that is the case, me personally, I would rather trust the people of that time. And when we're talking about authorship, we're talking. I'm sorry, but I believe Mark wrote it, Luke wrote it, Matthew wrote it. Why? Because I've got no evidence of anyone else writing it. I'm not going to start questioning something that's historical, that's from that time, based on how I feel about it, based on my own ideas. So I would rather accept the historical, the historical record as they are, rather than as I would like them to be. We don't know everyone's intentions. If it says Mark wrote it, yes, Mark wrote it. So the fact that you're talking about additions, but you're talking about as if there was some kind of intention to corrupt anything or to do anything that's not right. And again, you brought up what benefit is that. Exactly, there would be no benefit to even do any of that because it would have just caused more persecution. Why continue with a religion that you're being you can get murdered for? I mean, it's just nonsensical for any Christians to try and continue this idea that Jesus is God and that he was he resurrected from the dead, knowing that they could be killed at any point, at any given moment. So you don't have any evidence to show otherwise. These are just claims and opinions according to your ideas, and that's how you feel.
All right, thank you, Octavio.
Yeah. So there's other religions from about that time, like Mithraism, for instance, or Zoroastrianism. I mean, that was even earlier, and there's a lot of other sort of mythical things from around that time. But I noticed that you don't automatically believe that the people that wrote them are trustworthy. You only believe that the one that you believe in is trustworthy. Even the most fervent Christian scholars all agree that the Gospels are anonymous, that the early church fathers ascribed to these people, but they don't know that they actually wrote them. Even every Christian scholar agrees with that. So I'm not sure why you're sort of saying, well, that's what I believe and I'm just making it up, because I don't refer to my opinion. I refer to this scholarly opinion. That is the opinion on the Gospels. If you notice in most versions of the Bible, it will say at the start of the New Testament that the Gospels are anonymous. It will actually say that, and that traditionally they've been ascribed to these people, but there's no certainty that they are. So what you've got to understand is that the people who were Christians and the Palestinians and the Jews, they really disliked the Roman Empire. So this religion would have been very beneficial to causing problems for Rome. It caused a lot of headaches for Rome, in fact. So I think that this idea that there's no benefit whatsoever to having a religion, or it's possible they just really fervently believed it, but that doesn't make it true just because they believed it, any more than just because Muhammad really believed in Allah, that religion is true. We've got to separate it. It doesn't matter how strongly someone believes in something. It's true based upon the evidence. And unfortunately, you have no evidence this actually occurred. Just a book making a claim or a series of documents making a claim that have been copied over and over and over does not actually prove that claim. It is simply you putting faith that this document is correct.
First of all, I'm not talking about Mithraism. I'm only talking about Christianity. I didn't say anything about Mithraism at all. I doubt there's much written on Mithraism. When it comes to scholars, scholarly opinions are divided. Depends on usually depends on what that scholar believes in. To be honest with you, but it's very much divided. You said the Gospels are anonymous, but somehow they are traditionally attributed to those people. Yes, they are. They are traditionally attributed to Mark, and traditionally means it goes back. You know, we have a 2,000 year tradition. It goes back to it goes back to those times. And the reason why they're traditionally attributed is because most likely they were the ones who actually wrote it. Um, uh, uh, um, Christianity would have been beneficial. Um, uh, how exactly would Christianity would have been beneficial? You're talking about Judaism, where you can be killed for blaspheming, you can be stoned to death. Jesus Christ Himself was on a few occasions almost stoned to death because he claimed to be God. That was the accusation. So how is it? And you've got Roman emperors that wanted you to worship them, which Christians would not do. Uh, I mean, Nero hated the religion so much he started a fight so he can blame Christians, so he can kill them, he can burn them to death. So, what benefit exactly would there be for Christians to continue this lie? I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense. There would be no benefit at all for being a Christian during that time, especially when they're not the authority, and the Jews and the Roman Empire is the authority, and they both hate. There would be no advantage at all for any Christian to follow that religion. I would rather not follow that religion if I knew it was a lie. I would rather just, guess what, save my own skin if I know it's a lie and not continue. And those records
That's
had
your
to be.
time, Octavio.
Yeah, go ahead. Then.
Did you have
so
one? Go ahead, Mark.
like, so if I'm a sort of Jewish dissident and I'm trying to cause trouble for the Roman Empire, hate the Roman Empire, as you say, which you're kind of proving my point right now, that a religion is very useful in getting people, the Jews, to support your cause against this empire. It's very useful, and religions have been used for that in many instances in the past, to rise up against an authority by using some message of divinity and divine selection to impel them to get them to rise up. So it is very good thing for the leaders of that religion to be able to say, and don't forget, they were claiming he was the Messiah, the one prophesied by the Jews to come back and save them. So they could say, hey, the Messiah had come, it is this person, and the Roman Empire is going to fall because of the impending return of the Messiah. Because don't forget, in Jesus' time, his return was impending. It was supposed to be right away. He said that I will return before some of you here have tasted death. And they put that message out there and garnered a very large following. As you said, they made it very difficult for the Roman Empire. So I'm not saying that, the people who followed the religion all knew that it was a lie, or a religion started to cause the Romans trouble, but it's a great way to get people to join your cause, because that is something that religion's good for doing. I also just want to add in the last seconds that I do want to get to some of my points as well. So maybe we could shift a little bit and look at the logical issues that I put down.
Yeah, that's a great point. I had asked you guys both in the private chat. No one seemed to notice, but how would you guys feel about an attempt of dropping the 2-minute back and forth even, and just opening it up to an open discussion at this stage? If it gets too hot, too overlapping, and people feel like they're not getting equal time, we can go back to the 2 minutes. But we're halfway through our 40
I'm
minutes
happy
already.
either way. I don't mind either way. I really do not.
Octavio, how about you? You want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I'm happy either way. Yeah, of course.
I think it would be more interesting. I believe that the discussion can evolve more naturally when we don't do the 2 minutes back and forth. However, Octavio, at any point, if you feel you're not getting equal time, and same with you, Mark, just say so, and we'll go right back on the 2-minute timers.
Sure.
Okay. With that, then, Mark, why don't you go ahead and lead us off with an open discussion with your point?
Okay.
So, do you mind if I just reply to Mark?
Oh, of course, go for it. Yeah.
I don't think the Romans would have used Christianity. Christianity was a fairly young religion, and it was already under persecution. And I don't know how much knowledge the Romans emperors would have had or even cared for Jewish beliefs in terms of understanding this opportunity to use Christianity for their own benefit. I don't that is not how the how the Roman emperors kind of carry themselves. They carry themselves believing that they themselves were gods. That was their mentality. For them to become all of a sudden, for them to abandon their beliefs that they've had for God knows how long, to now become subservient to Jesus Christ. And I truly I don't believe that. I think that's far fetched. Just wanted to mention about the documents being copied. At that time, the documents had to be copied because they were written on papyrus. They had to be copied. And there was circulated among the Christian community because they were written on papyrus. These things kind of they had to be constantly copied. That's the only way you could that was the only way. This is the reason why we've got 5,800 manuscripts today, because they had to be constantly copied in order to preserve it. So that's what I want to say. But yeah, over to Mark. I know you wanted to bring up some of your points.
I'm not saying that the Romans used it. I'm saying that the leaders of Christianity used it. The people that started the religion, it may have been very useful for, especially if they are sort of preaching things that aren't very well received in the empire. Having more people in your religion is advantageous. I'm not saying it was for the Romans' benefit. I'm saying it's for the early Christians' benefit. And the whole idea that sort of it had to be copied, it's still a problem because we don't have the originals, and there's no, and again, I really want to stress on this, there is no contemporary source for the resurrection, death of Jesus and resurrection. The first thing we have is 30 years afterwards. There is earlier works by Saul or Paul, but that is, he was not at the execution of Jesus. He makes that quite clear. He was not there. So that is not a contemporary source. But I do want to get to the problem of evil at some point. Well, I'm just saying I want to get to the problem of evil at some point. But if you do have something to add to that, I'm more than happy.
Because otherwise we'll keep going back and forth. But I was just going to talk about the nature of how things unfolded during the time of Jesus' death and the resurrection claim by the disciples. So things didn't unfold the way most people would wish to have unfolded. You had the Christian community first, and then things were being written down. The Christians had a certain view of the world, and they thought that the world was going to come to an end soon. There's many things that go into it. But go ahead, Mark. I don't, because otherwise then we'll keep back and forth. Go ahead.
Well, I sort of had some logical things, and I want to know whether I accurately depicted the Christian God in my slides, like all of the properties that I was talking about, the tri-omni God, or at least tri-maximally powerful, omniscient, sort of, maximally good God, whether that is an accurate description.
Oh, yes. Sorry, you can just repeat that if it's, we believe in a good God.
Well,
the triune God.
Well, it's not the triune God. That's the nature of being three persons, one God. The tri-omni God means omnipotent, so all-powerful, omniscient or all-knowing, and omnibenevolent. Yes. Well, omnibenevolent meaning sort of all good.
Yes, he is. Yeah, all of those attributes are correct. Yes.
So how would you address that good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, and that there is so much suffering in the world that I would put it to you that it could not be considered to be good?
I don't address it. It's written in the scriptures. In Genesis, when you have Adam and Eve disobeying God, and the Bible says the wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. So basically, we have a fallen nature. I mean, that's what the Bible communicates as. We have a fallen nature, and we can all see this. So this fallen nature is observable in reality. We can see that human beings have a fallen nature, and this is where the suffering came from. You can see that was not God's intention in the very beginning. because he created Adam to live for eternity and so on. But he disobeyed, and that disobedience is called sin. And most of the problems that we currently have in the world today can really be attributed to sin. If every human being right now stopped sinning, most of the issues that we complain about, like you would say, the problem of evil, would literally stop.
So do you think that things like viruses and disease, do you think that's a product of sin? You're sort of saying that sin is the wages of death. Death is the wages of sin, but it's also the wages of good actions as well. Like, we still die. So the problem is that you have these natural disasters, like Pompeii and volcanoes and earthquakes that kill tons of people. But you're sort of, they kill babies that are sort of, really, really young, like leukemia takes away children that haven't even lived yet, essentially. So what sin are they doing that warrants suffering and death?
It's not necessarily what sin they are doing, it's what sin they inherited. We are all going to die, people. All of us, we are all going to die. This is a reality, this is a fact of life that we are all aware of. When I talked about Adam and Eve being thrown out of the Garden of Eden. This is we didn't just inherit the fallen nature. We also inherited the current world that we live in. So even if there was no viruses and so on, we would still die. And the reason why the reason why we die is because we are supposed to face the judgment of God. That's the reason why we die. And then after the judgment of God, um, then we will not have a world with viruses and all of these things. So, but even if these viruses didn't exist, we would still grow old and we would still die, and that would still exist. That's still a reality. Nothing would change. Yes, we inherited a fallen world, and this is the reason why we have what we have. And yeah, that would be my answer to that.
So the action of inflicting disease upon these children, is that a good act by God for punishing us for the sin that has been?
I would argue that God did not inflict any disease on anyone. I would, when a criminal is brought before a judge, um, uh, uh, the, the the criminal is guilty of the crime, and the judge will punish him regardless. So basically, all that God did, God is being just in punishing us for the sin that Adam and Eve committed, and we inherited from Adam and Eve. This is in a sense God being a judge, or being a just judge, because he has to punish for our sins. When you break the law, you don't ask the judge, or you know what, you can try and ask him, but he will still punish you because you broke the law. Whether you like it or not,
Yes.
you will be punished, whether that hurts your feelings.
Yeah, so I would say that having a justice system that imprisons people for breaking the law is a good thing. But you're seem very hesitant to say that God punishing for righteous judgment is a good thing. So can I just get the answer to the question, which is God punishing these people through infliction of disease, or at least it also applies if he fails to stop them? Is that a good thing?
The punishment that God exacts is a good thing, yes, because
It's a
it's
good
not
thing.
God's fault that we sinned. It's not. It was our choosing out of our own free will with it, that, and now we are facing the consequences of it, and that includes the judgment of God. So that's basically it. So we inherited a fallen nature, we inherited a fallen world, and that's all due to us sinning. That's all due to sin. Like I said
Okay.
before, if everyone was to stop sin right now, the world would be so much a better place for everyone.
Okay. So let me get this correct. Those diseases and stuff, that's due to a fallen world, and that is because essentially in the past our people have sinned and we deserve it. So that righteous judgment of God is a good thing?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. 100%.
Okay. So by that logic, and hear me out here, when we use medicine to combat those diseases, are we not committing evil? Is that not a trying to thwart God's righteous judgment?
No, we are not committing evil. We are trying to help our
But
fellow men because this is what we inherited. This is what we inherited for what we've done wrong. Now, we are not committing evil when we try to help each other. God didn't just judge us; He offered us eternal salvation. So, for example, when we are finally judged, we can be saved through Jesus Christ, who entered the world, who suffered like us. So, if anyone understands the suffering that we are going through, it would be someone like Jesus Christ. So no, when we create new medicines to help each other out, when we do anything that goes, because fallen nature is because we sin. That's just a consequence of sin. So when we try to combat that, we are not doing something evil. We are doing something good because we have the capacity to be able to do good as well as evil.
if disease is God's righteous judgment and we cure disease, then I don't see how logically it follows that we're not stopping the righteous judgment, because there was a time thousands and thousands and thousands of years when we didn't even have penicillin. If you got an infected wound, you basically died in screaming agony. If a child got leprosy or something, they just died. From the advent of penicillin, we could sort of combat that, but God didn't give us that penicillin. We invented it. So is that not, if all of the screaming people dying before was God's righteous judgment on the sinful, why is it now that we invent penicillin that we're even allowed to treat God's righteous judgment?
The fact that we even have the faculties um, um, to be able to invent penicillin, the fact that we are even able to do that shows that God intends something greater for ourselves. The fact that God Himself came down shows that God intends. Even the fact that we have the ability to do so, because put it this way, we didn't have to exist. We didn't have to. God didn't have to allow us to continue to exist, and yet He allows us to continue to exist. So, and the fact, and that we have the intelligence to be able to create these medicines, just shows that God wants us to be able to create these medicines in order to put it this way, make our lives a little bit easier before we finally grow old and die.
Okay, so I think you're sort of begging the question there. You're sort of saying, hey, God is responsible for all of our intelligence, where I don't think that's been demonstrated in the slightest. I think that that's just a claim at the moment that I would like to see you demonstrate that is in fact the claim. But it stands to reason that we didn't have the intelligence to do that for a very, very long time. In fact, it's only part of the 20th century that we've actually had the intelligence to do that. So why let all of that suffering continue and leave it up to us, where He could have introduced penicillin thousands upon thousands of years ago, and we wouldn't have had so much horrendous suffering that you're sort of talking about an all benevolent God, that they only do what is good. So how does that make it good?
Um, okay, when we are talking about God, we're talking about the Creator. We're talking about the one who created everything. Okay,
Yes,
human
I'm aware.
beings, universe, and so on. All right, this is what we are talking about. So yes, if we have the intelligence to be able to create penicillin, it comes from God. That intelligence. Now, what you said? Why leave it for so long? Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah.
Why would God allow us? Because God is not interfering. Is not interfering, and we have the free will. We have the ability to do it. Why would God interfere? We we're going to create at our own pace. So, but the thing is, what God is more interested in is basically ushering in a new world where these things do not exist, which is what was first intended with the creation of Adam and Eve, since they were going to live forever. So God's intention, we might look at it as this is horrible what we are going through right now, but God's intention is to give us eternal life, is so that is to give us a world where none of these things exist, none of these viruses and problems that we have in the world. That's God's final intention. This is why we have a judgment day, and I hope it comes soon, so that the new world that we will inherit, for those that decide to follow Him, will be a better world, for all of us, and we won't have these issues that you're complaining about.
Yeah,
Real quick, Mark, real quick, if I may just interject real quick, just to let you guys know, we have about 5 minutes left of our open discussion here. So anyone in the chat who's got questions for our debaters, please at Skeptic Spin in the chat, and I will ask your questions. Sorry for the interruption. Continue, Mark.
Okay, so there's a problem there, because you say God doesn't interfere, but presumably He was the one that created all of these diseases and things in the first place. He created everything, so how could He not? It's kind of weird that He inflicts, like the flood, for instance, drowns everybody in the world, but He doesn't interfere. So this is supposed to be a benevolent God, an all benevolent God, incapable of doing any kind of evil. So you still have to argue that the child dying of leukemia when our treatments do not work is actually a good act. It's actually something good that has happened, which leaves you in a position of, well, why is the child that gets cured by human intervention a good thing, and the child that dies a bad thing?
So you have to simplify that a little bit more for me, Mark. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. Are you saying God is bad for the Noah's flood? Are you saying that God is a bad God? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I had 2 points, really. The first one is that your claim that God does not interfere. The God of the Bible shows that to be completely false. He has interfered a lot in over the course of the Bible. Also, too, God punishing for our sins also shows that He interferes. So if we have a child that dies of leukemia, you would have to say that that is a good thing, even though it would be ostensibly up to God to give that child leukemia in the first place. So I don't know how that would be not interfering.
Okay. God interfering in the Old Testament. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to. God interfering in the Old Testament. First of all, God has the right to interfere whenever He feels like it, but for the most part, He doesn't interfere. God interfering in the Old Testament was necessary, because Jesus hadn't arrived yet, put it away, to fulfill the law. So what we see is God creating a theocracy, um, with, um, uh, with the Jewish people, using the Jewish people as a vehicle to basically bring about the salvation through Jesus Christ. But in the intention again, and the intention again that we see there is that God is doing this so that He can so that He can eventually save humanity from sin. Now, when you see God interfere in those parts, what we are seeing is, because this is a Jewish account, what we are seeing is God basically training a group of people, and for the coming of Jesus Christ. This is the interference that we are seeing. God can interfere anytime. He is God after all. But for the most part, He doesn't interfere on things, the examples that you've given and so on and so forth. Does he have the right to interfere whenever he feels like it? I'm sure he does. And he's done so. But in the Old Testament, what we are really seeing is God basically preparing the Jewish people to accept the Messiah. That's what we are seeing. This is why we see God interfere so much in the Old Testament, because he's leading them he's training them to believe in Him, to not only believe in Him, but to follow His teachings, follow His follow His laws and so on and so forth. And yes, and because salvation hadn't come yet, God cannot tolerate sin. This is why you have laws that said that if your child misbehaves and continuously misbehaves and doesn't let, well, take him out and stone him to death. This is why you had those type of laws. If someone commits adultery, stone him to death, because sin, God cannot tolerate sin because God is a just God. And then you see Jesus coming in, and this is when you get the salvation has now arrived, and anyone can choose to have it if they want to. But that's the basis for God interfering in the Old Testament.
Yeah, interfering isn't the question. The claim is that it's an all benevolent God, so the interference must be in a benevolent way. And when you sort of have a God deity that is sort of, has a plan which is outlined and inflicts these evils upon humanity, especially natural evils, like I don't know if you would, acknowledge that sort of natural disasters must be at least approved by God in some way. I'd hate to think that earthquakes can just happen without a God really not wanting them, because that would violate the all-powerful part of God. Everything, he has authority over literally everything, is all-powerful. So it breaks the all-powerful clause if he doesn't have authority over that. If he does have authority, and that's a horrible thing that happens, like lots of people die, lots of people get injured, then it breaks the all benevolent part of that. So you've got a problem here that the interference that you're sort of outlining is pretty awful. Like, for instance, in Pharaoh's case, where he kills every firstborn son, including of the slaves and animals and everybody, firstborn son, in order to punish Pharaoh after he hardened Pharaoh's heart. That I would absolutely call an evil act, because those people didn't do anything. But you're sort of saying, hey, that's a good thing. And I'm extending that to really every, I call it natural evil, because as an atheist, I don't think natural events are evil. But when you have a creator of the universe that dictates every action in that universe, it is an evil because there is intent behind it. Like God intended that earthquake to happen.
I would say.
So 1 second there, Octavio. That kind of pretty much brings our time that I had intended to an end. However, would you both be interested in a couple of minutes of a closing statement?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, just
your closing statement can totally be in response to what Mark said.
No. I'll let Octavio have the final word.
All right, even better. There you go, Octavio. Please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. I would say when you said Pharaoh, those people didn't do anything wrong. I mean, I don't think we have. I don't think that's a fact. I mean, they did enslave those people they did enslave the Jews for quite a long time. So I don't think God creates natural disasters. I don't think God wants natural disasters to be the case. Otherwise, he wouldn't have instituted a plan of salvation for humanity or a way of us being saved. He would have just got rid of us. That would have been much easier, I would assume. I don't think God plans disasters. I think this is just something that we inherited for committing sin. This is how sin. This is how important sin is. I don't think God, and you trying to describe Pharaoh as this nice person, he was far from it. And yes, God hardened his heart because his heart was already very hardened, and sometimes God just allows us to be what we want to be. He contends with us, he challenges us, he tries to get us out of our state and a state of rebellion. But if we continue in that path, God gives us up to our own miseries. So I don't think people that enslave people like the Pharaoh did to the Jews for as long as he did. I don't think he was a very nice person. That would be my and those natural disasters that came upon, according to the Bible, that came upon the what's his name, the Egyptians. I think they were just. I think that was a punishment. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, guys. Sorry.
It's all good.
No problem.
Yeah. So, would you guys like to have a couple minutes there closing?
Yeah, please. I would really, if that's okay with
Yeah,
you.
I'll let Mark have the last word. It's fine. I'm okay.
No. But usually in a debate, we'd bookend it. So you would start and you would have the final word, right? Because I
Oh, okay.
have the next opening. That's how it's usually done. So the affirmative would
I would
start it,
agree. And since
and
it's
they
my
would have
debate and my channel, that's what we're
oh,
going to
that's
do.
true. Yeah,
So,
no, Justin, I'm just
Mark,
going to tell you what to do.
by all means, I'll give you 3 minutes. Go.
Right. So it seems to be the arguments are reliant on sort of old texts, and I don't have a problem. I'm not a mythicist, or I don't think Jesus was a myth, but I do think that the stories that occurred were grew in size. They're myths in the sense that these supernatural events grew in size in the retelling. They became larger. It's the old "I caught this fish" story, and every time it's told, the fish gets larger. After only a few days, we had people saying that they saw an angel saving Trump from a bullet, and that's after a few days. You can imagine in the ancient world, where a lot of news relies on word of mouth, how the stories get larger retelling after 30 years, which is the earliest manual we've got. Now, the ones that I brought up, really, it is the problem of evil. It's an unsolved problem in the Christian world, in my opinion, where all of these horrible things happening to us and true suffering cannot be good, but they still happen anyway. And I find it odd that God apparently doesn't have authority over earthquakes. If God does have the power to stop them and fails to stop them, he's still not all benevolent, because stopping them would be a benevolent act. Now, that's if the earthquake in fact is a bad thing, which almost all of humanity would agree. When we see thousands killed by an earthquake, it's horrible. So it's kind of this double standard for God's morality is somehow good even when it's bad, and our morality, which is bad even when it's good. So I think that there hasn't really been any evidence shown. Octavio has referred to the claims in the Bible, and they are claims. There's no 500 witnesses. We don't know who wrote them. They are anonymous. We can only say traditionally they've been ascribed to these people. So the evidence is completely lacking. We have the same evidence for other mythological figures out there. And again, I don't claim that Jesus was entirely a myth, but there's no reason to think that Jesus was in fact a god. There's also problems with the texts and the discrepancies that I pointed out. So we cannot take a claim of supernatural events from a religious text, any religious text, whether that be the Quran, the Torah, or the Bhagavad Gita. We cannot take them to be reliable. You would need more than that. You would need evidence of these things actually happening. And there is no external sources for the resurrection happening outside the Gospels. It just does not exist, except for Paul saying it happened, but he wasn't there either. So we kind of have these massive problems with who wrote them, whether the events they wrote about in fact happened, and whether these supernatural events happened as well. But I'll leave it there. And I want to thank Octavio and Justin. This has been a fantastic debate. I've had a blast. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Octavio, 3 minutes. What you got?
I don't really have much to say. I came into this debate where the question is the Christian God real, and I think I've proved my case. When we look at history, no one denies that the Christian God is real. And who is the Christian God? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is a real historical figure, is a real historical character. And just because we don't like the idea of miracles or any supernatural event does not take away from the fact that this is rooted in history. Okay, if we don't like these supernatural claims, that's to do with your own personal bias. That's not to do with the historical record. The historical record shows that Jesus Christ is God, and the people claim that he was God, and he resurrected from the dead. Well, he's God primarily because he resurrected from the dead. Had he not resurrected from the dead, then we wouldn't even consider him as God. So, I mean, is the Christian God real? Yes, he is. And no historian, no scholar can deny this. So I think that now, if Jesus Christ never entered creation, second person of the Trinity, if he never entered creation, then yes, I couldn't use the natural world to prove the immaterial. Absolutely, I couldn't do that. If you're asking me to prove something that's immaterial, that's outside space, matter, and time, I wouldn't be able to do that. But it was because he entered creation. It's because of the historical record that and claims made about him, which is in the historical record, that I can say that Jesus Christ is God, and the history since then shows that, proves that. So I mean, it is the biggest religion today in the world. Um, I know that doesn't count necessarily as evidence to mark, but it's still true nevertheless, and it will continue to grow. But so it is a fact. So I prove my point that Jesus Christ is God. He has entered creation, so on. So I don't think that the problem with evil. The problem with evil. I mean, one can just look at Jesus Christ, who we call God. Becoming incarnate and entering creation and suffering the way he did. So if anyone understands the hardships of living in this world, it would be God. He himself did that in order to save us, so that we don't perish in hell. And to me, the fact that God, even after our disobedience, he still has a plan
There's
for us to
time,
be saved
Octavio.
and to be with him. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
finish your
yeah, I
sentence.
just think it's great. It's a great, it's a great God. Put it that way.
All right.
He still
Um,
has a plan for us.
so this has been awesome, fantastic. The pace of this, the discussion, the debate itself is wicked, fantastic. Octavio, I hope you'll come visit us again. We're not completely quite there yet, guys. Platform wide, all over YouTube, and looks like we're also live on Twitter right now. We've got over 80 live viewers right now. So make sure you all take our spin literally around the world to the UK to Octavia's channel, The Solution Podcast, and at the very least, pump a like on his channel, and then get over to Mark Reid's and throw a like over there too. And if your thumb isn't too bruised or blistered or overworked, come on over to at Skeptic Spin and like and subscribe over here. My channel has experienced in the last week something like 40 new subscribers. So whoever you are out there, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for that. Now we're going to get into some questions. Now, given the infancy of my channel, I don't have access to super chats, but that's okay. We can do chat with questions without super chats. I have starred them all. Now, to be fair, I want to make sure that Octavio understands all of these questions have pretty much come from Ember, who's a channel super friend. Okay. But Ember is a very fair person. So these should still all be great questions. Now, that doesn't mean if you don't have a question in yet, you guys can't get one in. Just make sure you at Skeptic Spin for me. Okay. So first question from Ember. Can O explain the Trinity, pretty please?
Oh, explain the Trinity. The best way to explain the Trinity is uh, we accept the revelation. We accept the revelation. This is what transpired from the revelation. The Trinity, the idea that there are three persons, one nature, and it's that one nature that we call one God. It's something that is recorded in the scriptures. You can see all throughout the Old Testament, all throughout the New Testament, and we accept the revelation. That's like trying to understand everything about God. We can't. I couldn't explain it to you, but I can only explain what has been revealed. And what has been revealed is that God is one nature in three persons. That's what it is. That's the best way of me explaining it to you. Put it that way.
Do you want to comment on that at all, Mark?
Yeah, no Trinitarian doctrine is explicitly taught in the Old Testament. There are some interpretations which sort of say, hey, they're hinting at it here or hinting at it there, but it does not say that God is Trinitarian. In fact, if you look at the history of Yahweh in the Old Testament, it actually came from a pantheon where El was the greatest god, and his consort Asherah had sons, Yahweh and Baal. So when we actually look at the historical record, this is sort of a fabrication of the New Testament. The whole idea of the Trinity is illogical. It breaks logic in a major degree to say that something is 100% God, 100% God, and 100% God, but it only adds up to 100. It absolutely is illogical and irrational. As I said in my opening, I did the math and that does not work out. Now, there could be 3 parts of one thing. It could be 100% God and each has 33.3%, but that's not what the Christians are saying. That's not the correct interpretation from them. So we've got this belief in something irrational and illogical. It's never been explained to me, I'll put it that way.
I'll give you the final word here, Octavio.
No, the Trinity is definitely not irrational. The Trinity is not taken from other pagan religions. That's not what it is. And I would love to have a debate on where you can find the Trinity in the Old Testament. But yes, you can find the Trinity in the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's all over. It's all over the scriptures. So
right.
Yeah, I would love to have a debate on that. Yeah.
Let's make a note. A Trinity debate coming soon. You guys heard it here. Octavio has thrown down the gauntlet. We're going to find an opponent for that one. Okay, next question. So, Ember, thank you so much for your support here tonight. So, Ember, Skeptic Spin, could an all-powerful God accomplish his goals without killing children or causing suffering generally? Octavio, I believe it's for you.
Yeah, I find that question a bit childish. Since we are all, no disrespect, no disrespect.
No,
Just
challenge it. Go for it.
Because we are all going to die, guys. Okay, so please, just accept it. You're all going to die. And where would you rather be? Where do you think children would rather be? Here on Earth, where there's suffering, where human beings are consistently sinning and causing suffering and causing hell to other human beings, or would you rather them to be with God? I mean, I know where I would want children to be in, but if you truly believe that there is a God, and if you truly believe that this God, that there is an afterlife, then I would say those children are better off with God in that world than in this world, where human beings do all types of evil. It's unbelievable.
Mark, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so this is sort of, and I'm really sorry, Octavio, but this is illogical and irrational thinking because you're sort of doing what's called an argument from consequence. It's like saying, well, if I don't win the lottery tomorrow, I won't be able to pay my rent. So I'm going to believe that I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow. Whether or not something is true or not, regardless of the consequences that it entails. So if you're saying, which would you rather be true? It doesn't matter how much you would want something to be true. It's either true or it's not, irrelevant of what you want. So another word for what you're engaged in is sort of wishful thinking. Like, well, if you want there to be a heaven, don't you want there to be a heaven? So why don't you believe in it? Our beliefs should be based upon the evidence and what is actually true and not true, not on what we wish to be true. That will lead to confirmation bias. Like, you will see the things to convince you if you want it to be true. A lot of the scientific process that we have is trying to eliminate confirmation bias because it is such a huge thing in human nature. We see what we want to see. So we try to eliminate that confirmation bias. So it's kind of strange to me that you'll go to, well, if you want it to be true, believe it, because then it's true. That's got no bearing on whether it's true or not.
Final word on the topic there, Octavio.
Justin, can you just read the question one more time? And I think the answer is that question.
The question was, could an all-powerful God accomplish his goals without killing children or causing suffering generally?
Yes, exactly. No, because we are all going to face death. And remember, he said God. So he's assuming the existence of God. So what I said was absolutely correct. Eventually, if you do believe there's a God, then you believe there's an afterlife according to the revelation. So therefore, where would you rather those children to be? But of course, could he accomplish it? Well, the fact that we're all going to die, yeah, that would be my
Okay.
I could go more into it. I know because I have to keep it short. Put it that way.
It's not tragic. Frankly, like Mark started an early day. You're the one who's watching like the
Yeah,
midnight
that's
clock
true.
go by. So
I'm going to get better as time goes on.
yeah, so
That's
it's fine. Yeah, but once Mark gets caffeinated, he starts growing hair and things get wild. It's crazy. But the next yeah, I went there. Next question from a Richard Wigglesworth. Why does God create people who won't become Christians? Because he knows everything, then gives them free will, knowing they still won't, then sends them to hell. Ergo, God creates people to torture? Question mark.
No, God does not create people to torture. God does not create people. God gives us free will, and we can either accept that. For example, why do we have children? I have three children, knowing that one day they're going to do something that will annoy me, knowing that one day they're not going to obey me. Why do we continue to have children? We need to stop because they're just going to repeat the same mistakes and so on. Yeah, we might get a good one, or he might become a drunkard. He might become all these possibilities. Why do we continue to do that? We need to stop doing that. So no, God gives us free will, and the idea is that we want to be with Him. And if you don't want to be with Him, God isn't going to force you either. You don't have to be with Him, you know. But then again, there is consequences to not being with Him. Put it that way. And there so we were created to be with Him. If we reject that, then well, we're going to have to face the consequences of what that entails. And that's not God's fault. That's our choice. He's just respecting our choice. That's it.
Comment, Mark?
Yeah, well, the problem is, and sort of I'll like what was in my introduction, that you said that a God wants to be with us, but the very first thing that a God, especially an omniscient God that knows everything, would know that he's got to provide more evidence than just a claim in a few texts, religious texts. And so the fact that he does not provide that when it would be trivial for an all-powerful God to do so, absolutely trivial, shows that either A, he does not want all people to believe, or else he would provide the necessary evidence for them to believe, or he's incapable of providing the evidence, which in that case, you've got another problem that he isn't all powerful. So that provides a problem in and of itself. The idea that a God would want us to be with him, which the first step to that is belief, yet be insufficient to provide the evidence to believe, shows that it's a logical contradiction. The God doesn't exist.
I find that to be a bit. I mean, what more do you want God to do? He created you. He created the entire world around you. I've never met a human being that was born and said, "Hey, I created all of this around me." No, we just came into a world that had all of these things in there. I mean, He created us with the ability, the capacity to understand right from wrong. I mean, what more do we want Him to do? He revealed Himself to us. It's like. At this point, we're just making any excuse to not know him. So just anyone just can look around and say, "Well, I didn't create this. Well, someone must have. If I didn't do it." That in itself is evidence that there must have been a being that managed to create everything around us.
All right. We'll move forward from there to our next question. Hey, Mark, Ember wants to know if atheism can have multiple context based definitions, can a God also?
Sure, there's tons of definitions of God. In fact, most Christians don't have the same exact definition of God. I sort of kept my definition of God very vague as an agent with some sort of power to suspend or violate the laws of nature, because that would include Roman gods and sort of Zoroastrian gods and any god that you could care to name. But most of these gods will vary upon who is doing the claim. Absolutely. It's just, at the moment we're talking about the specific god, and more sort of specifically the a god of classical Christianity, which has a number of properties. So absolutely, the definition of God can change. Yes.
Comment, Octavio?
No, the definition of God cannot change. If it does change, then you are not worshiping the God that you first defined. You're worshiping something else. The Christian definition of God has not changed, and it won't change, and it will be extremely problematic if it does change. So, yes, and I'm sure if you ask Muslims, they will have the same opinion, and I'm sure if you ask Jews, they'll have the same opinion. To change the definition of God is very problematic as a religious person.
Final word, Mark.
Yeah, so Calvinism describes a God as sort of ordaining all things and does not give free will in the slightest. So that is a different definition of God. There's other definitions of God that Christians have that are maximally powerful and not omnipowerful. There's different definitions of God, whether you are a Muslim. Allah just means God, and they have the same origin point. So I can demonstrate that people's definitions of God changes even slightly in Christianity, but more largely throughout other religions. Buddha is God, and there's multiple Hindu gods which have vastly different definitions than the Christian God, with vastly different attributes and properties. So I can show that is demonstrably not true, that the definition of God does not change. If you want to keep it really vague, like I did, sure, that would encompass all of them. But when you ask specifically somebody what is God and to provide a definition, they will provide the one from their own religion, which varies immensely depending on the religion.
All right, thank you. Ember will forgive me, but we're going to skip some of Ember's questions because we're getting questions from other guests and other viewers.
Give other people a chance.
No, I mean, for most of the debate, it was just questions from members, so it was fine. But now that we're getting some other people, yeah, we're going to give them a chance. So Deviant Outcasts would like to know, how can we have free will if God is omniscient? I believe that question directed to Octavio.
How can we have free will if God is omniscient? What does he mean? Sorry.
Well, yeah, I think the idea here is that if God already knows what is going to happen, how could you consider anything a human to do to be free will?
Oh, I see. I see what he's trying to say. All right. God having the power to know everything because he's outside of space, matter, and time. God is outside time. God having the power to know everything and that doesn't have an impact on our choices and what we choose to do. We can just because I know what's going to happen does not necessarily mean that the other person is being controlled by me, or that person or that person is somehow yeah, like I said, being controlled by me. Although the person doesn't have free will, that person does absolutely have free will. They can choose to do. It's just that God knows everything that's going to happen. That's why He's God.
All right, that question is the question's an awesome one and a heavy one that could almost be a debate in itself. But yeah. In any case, Mark, I'll let you comment on it.
Yeah, trust Deviant Outcast. She's trying to throw a fly in the onion. So if God knows, and here's the crux of the matter in philosophy and the sort of the deterministic nature of God's omniscience in philosophy. If God knows that I'm going to pick up this cup, is there any way that I could choose not to? So if God knows that ahead of time, it will happen, even though it appears that I'm making a choice, because God knows the outcome, there is no way that that time can pass and I will not do what God knows. So we don't really have free will under that, just an illusion of free will, because it has to play out as God has seen it. There is no other way it can be. So we're talking about, is there a possible world in which God sees that I will pick up the cup and do not pick up the cup? And the theist would say, no, you absolutely, if God sees that happening, you would have to do so. So there is no free will there, philosophically.
Final word, Octavio.
I disagree, but this is definitely a question that I'm going to be looking more into because I'm definitely interested in it. How does that work exactly? But yeah, of course, there's things about God that we don't completely understand how He's able to do what He's able to do. So, and I wouldn't presume to sit here and completely say that I understand how God can somehow know everything, and yet I still have free will. I wouldn't presume that. But yeah, that's what I would say.
All right, thank you. We got a question for the both of you from Left-Handed Jedi. Do you think an eternal afterlife of any kind is a good thing or a bad thing? I'm going to let Mark answer first.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a good thing. I think that it is the brevity of our lives that give them meaning. It is the sort of preciousness of life because it does end. I also think that humans and people sort of get used to anything at all. So even if you're sort of saying, "Hey, you're in bliss forever," eventually that would just become the norm. It would become boring. So I don't think an afterlife would be all that it's cracked up to be. And I think the Christian afterlife especially is pretty heinous, because even if you do go to heaven, and so say I'm a believer and my brother or my wife is not, I would be in heaven happy while they're being tortured. Now I don't see how that's even possible for me to do so, as I love my wife dearly. But that's ostensibly what would happen. And because I can't be sad, I don't think I would be me, because in order to be me, I would have to be sad if my wife was, or if I knew that millions of humans were being tortured. I don't think I would, and still happy and laughing and in some kind of bliss. I don't think I would be me, because that is something that ought to concern me.
And Octavio, do you think that an afterlife of any
Um,
kind is a good thing or a bad thing?
it's a wonderful thing. Um, I mean, imagine the suffering that we see in this world. I mean, I know we live in the West, and most people don't actually can't wrap their heads around the level of suffering that people in the rest of the world actually encounter. I've had a taste of it, and by surviving the war, so I know what evil looks like, and yes, in West we're pretty much for all intents and purposes protected from it. But the thing is, an afterlife, what you're talking about is, um, in order to be able to answer that question, you'd have to know what that actually means, what that entails. And if you haven't experienced it, if you don't know what that's like, how can you make such a judgment? How can you turn around and say, no, I wouldn't, I think it would be boring, or I think it would be, I think that's silly. We don't know what that entails. We don't know what that looks like. Me having experienced Jesus Christ is something that I definitely want to, if that's what afterlife feels like, if that's what afterlife is, um, then yes, I want to, I want to be with Jesus Christ for eternity, because that is absolutely amazing. And imagine just a world without all the suffering in this world. It would be amazing to live in a world like that. It would be amazing to be around your loved ones and so on, and not watch them suffer and die and perish and so on. Yeah. So yeah, that'll
All
be my
right.
response.
Next question from Spellcab von Sparta. What is the Christian definition of a god exactly? So I assume that's Octavio.
Three persons, one nature. That's what God is.
Oh, interesting. Do you have any
Triune God.
comments or questions, Mark?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're talking about the classical sort of Christian God, the one that's been usually used for ages now, it's the triune God, as Octavio mentioned. It's a mutable God. It's a triomni God. There's a few properties associated with it. And of course, it's the Jesus that died on the cross to absolve us of our sins. It's fairly well defined.
And final word, Octavio.
Oh yeah, so yeah. I mean, just go read um uh the creed of the Council of Nicaea. It pretty much defines the definition, and this is what every Christian must abide by. If you are a Christian and you do not follow this definition, you do not belong to the Christian community. Whether you're Protestant, whether you're Catholic, Orthodox, you have to. You have to. The definition is in the Nicene Creed. Go read that. That's what the definition is.
Oh, okay. And our next question's coming in from another channel super friend, Robin Webster.
Do you mind, just before I start that, Octavio, do you know the Nicene Creed? Doesn't that say that God is the maker of all things visible and invisible?
Yes, it does.
So he would be responsible for natural disasters and disease and everything.
Responsible in the sense that he says to himself, "Ooh, I would love to cause this natural disaster now." No, is he responsible for creating everything? You can say that. You can blame him for everything if you want because he's the creator of everything and he set everything in motion. So you can use that logic to say, yes, he is responsible for literally everything. But is he? What I'm saying is that since Adam and Eve disobeyed and we inherited fallen nature and from all these other consequences because we don't see him doing that before that. So that's what I mean by him not being responsible for things. So he's not sitting there saying to himself, "Oh, let me cause this earthquake now. Let me cause this. Let me cause this volcano to erupt." He's not saying he's not responsible in that sense. It's just these are the consequences of inheriting a fallen world, and these things will happen. This is why lions attack us, for example. Whereas in Garden of Eden, that wasn't the case.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So as I was saying, next question from super friend Robin Webster. If Adam and Eve were not aware of good and evil, as Bible says, how would they know it was bad to disobey God?
Well, Adam and Eve were instructed um, to not do something, and if you read Genesis, they were told, "Don't eat from this fruit." God was very specific. Don't eat from the tree. Don't eat from this tree. He was very specific, and Adam and Eve decided to exercise their free will and still eat from that tree. Um, and all they had to do was obey. The same way they disobeyed, they could have just obeyed.
Comment, question mark?
Yeah, so it's sort of, if they don't know what's good and evil, they wouldn't know that it's evil to disobey. They wouldn't be aware of that. When you're talking about good and evil, you're talking about morality, what you ought to and ought not to do, with sort of good and evil being the intent behind it. So you may say, hey, it's good to obey God and it's bad to disobey God. Well, sure, but if they don't have any knowledge of what is good and what is bad, or evil in this case, like what is good and what is evil, then they wouldn't know that it's evil to disobey God. They would be like children with no idea that disobeying their parents is actually bad. They wouldn't have no idea of the consequences because they have no idea of what bad even is.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree, Mark. They would not have any idea of good and bad is. Their job was to obey. That is it. It was to basically just don't disobey, and it's not about whether they knew good and evil or if they had experienced it or understood the consequences of it. It's not about that. It's just about they were instructed to not disobey and they disobeyed.
All right. So I have a bunch more questions here lined up from Ember. I'm going to ask one more of them, but before I do that, real quick, Octavio, the Solution Podcast. What do you do over there? What are you up to? What's going on in the next couple weeks?
Reactions and more discussions about all different types of topics. We discuss everything from religion to politics to um, you know relationships to we have all types of debates and reactions there about what's going on in the world currently and where we are all going. Where's the soul heading to? So the Solution Podcast is just basically a place where you share your ideas about what you think is going on in this world and what the consequences will be and the outcome for humanity. So that's basically it. That's what we do there.
All right. If you're over there watching on Mark Reid's channel or on the Skeptic Spin channel right now, please show Octavio at least the same respect he showed us by coming here to debate tonight, and go over to the Solution Podcast and hit a like over there on this debate that he's live streaming on his channel right now. And with that, Mark Reid Atheism, what have you been up to over there, and what's coming up?
Yeah, I've been doing Aimbot is Back, which is a looking at situations from Reddit in a secular morality light, trying to evaluate what's right, what's wrong under secular morality and consequentialism, secular humanism more specifically. I have been trying to do more debates, and I hope this alleviates my audience's cruel thirst for debates. It's been fantastic, so I really appreciate it. Generally I engage in counter apologetics and sort of approaching things from a atheist and secular humanist perspective. So I hope you can join me as I stumble my way through YouTube, sort of evaluating things from a secular sphere.
All right, thank you so much. I myself, Justin, aka Yahooligan, here on the new Skeptic Spin channel. As you guys know, I have a regular weekly show that I normally do, where I bring on guests to react and comment on YouTube Shorts. Tonight is kind of my return to doing some debate stuff, but I'm doing my own way, on my own thing, on my own channel. And I'm so happy that we had so much interaction from the viewers tonight. So thank you so much for everyone in the chat right now. And the moderators, especially those moderators that both Mark and I share, who are now monitoring double chats tonight. Thank you so much for all of your support. And make sure you hit like and subscribe for me, because since last week I gotta mention it, I have to say it, the Stacy's Mom podcast I had on last week with a special sneak attack appearance from Trevor from Believe It or Not. And since that moment, in a short that I put out, the channel just like boom, 40 new subscribers. So that's been awesome. So anyone who is brand new here, thank you so much for your subscriptions. And with that, next week, Monday. So it's a special Monday because here in Canada, it's a brand new holiday. It's only a few years old, and we call it the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And I'm going to have Arn Ra on Skeptic Spin to do triple take. So that should be entertaining. And with that, I'm going to read this last final question from Ember. Ember still had a bunch of questions. I'm just choosing one to end things on, and it goes for both of you because I find it to be fairly interesting as I stall to find out where it went. Right. So so this will be a question for both of you. Name one immoral act not condoned by God in the Bible. We'll start with Octavio.
Name one immoral act not condoned by the God in the Bible. Oh Lord. God doesn't condone any immoral acts at all.
I think that's a fine answer, actually.
If you think people don't like the idea of being judged, I don't know if it's a secular thing, but guys, I advise you to, and this is not a dig at Mark at all. Secularism, where we abort 73 million babies worldwide, I mean, the entire West is collapsing, guys. Listen, God does not condone any immoral acts. What it is that God judges justly, and if we can't accept that because we want to be our own gods, which is what I'm seeing more, which was what I see as part of this rebellion against God, then that's our own problem. That's our own issues. But God does not condone immoral acts. What it is He judges justly, and just because we don't like His judgment, it does not mean that He is wrong for judging us. So yeah, that's what I would say.
All right, and Mark.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do so because things like killing and murder, you might say that they don't, but in fact they command the Israelites to kill other tribes, so they definitely do. It's very difficult to sort of say that there's not one act, that there is an exclusion principle for if God wanted to do it. So one act that I would say is immoral. I guess lying, I guess, maybe. God does not condone lying, but I don't think lying is always an immoral act. I think there is sometimes a good reason to lie if it helps people. Like if there's Nazis at your door and you're trying to hide a family of Jewish people, I think that lying is actually the moral thing to do. So, but I guess lying is an immoral act that God does not condone.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to both of my guests tonight. This has been a fantastic debate. I very much enjoyed it. I'm so glad I did this, and I'm very excited now to do another one. So hopefully, I can impose on you guys again in the future to come and discuss these things with us. And also for our live audience who's out there on the Mark Reid Atheism channel, on the Solution Podcast, and of course on Skeptic Spin. From myself, Justin, thank you all so much for your likes, your subscriptions. If you're watching this in the Wayback Machine in the future, don't forget to add some comments down below because the YouTube algorithm likes those as much as we like them as well. If you think you have what it takes to come debate either Mark or Octavio, do so in the Skeptic Spin comments, and I will reach out to you and we'll see if we can set something up, because I'm looking for more voices to platform here and have these discussions with. So Mark, Octavio, once again, thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone. See you next time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Justice. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you. Anytime.
Thanks, Octavio.